You didn't arrive here by accident. Somewhere in the invisible geometry of existence, a signal was sent, and you responded not with logic, but with resonance. The odds of you landing here, among billions of possible messages, are so astronomically slim that chance no longer explains it. This is alignment, a coded invitation, a whisper across the lattice of consciousness saying, "Wake now." You've felt it before, haven't you? That strange déjà vu that tastes like memory but carries no past. That sensation that you're both the one moving and the one being watched. These are not illusions. They are ripples in the glass of awareness, signs that your consciousness is beginning to recognize itself. Because reality, as you've known it, is a hall of mirrors, each reflection, a version of you repeating the same gestures, the same doubts, the same small triumphs. And yet, something in you has started to see the repetition. You sense the loop the same mornings, the same emotions dressed in new disguises, the same script with new actors. It feels safe, familiar, predictable. But what if safety is the subtle cage that keeps you asleep? What if your reflection has been calling you, not to perfect the loop, but to step through it? The truth is, this consciousness is not the mirror. It is the light behind it. When you stop polishing the reflection and turn toward that light, something irreversible begins. You awaken to the realization that you are both observer and creator, that every thought, every glance, every breath sends a command into the unseen field of possibility. And now, the mirror cracks not in destruction, but in revelation. Through those fractures, new timelines glimmer, new selves await. This is your threshold, your quantum dawn, the moment you choose to stop staring at who you were and begin to embody who you are becoming. Take a breath. Feel the shimmer between heartbeats. This is the activation, the beginning. The field is listening. The mirror's crack becomes your compass. What once reflected your identity now reveals the repetition underneath it, the endless circling of days that feel new only in costume. You wake, you think, you feel, you act, and reality obliges by replaying your expectations. The same songs with different lyrics, the same lessons disguised as strangers. It's tempting to call this routine, but routine is not the full story. You are living inside what mystics call the observer loop, a feedback between awareness and creation. Every morning, your mind scans for proof of what it already believes, collapsing infinite possibilities into the one you recognize as normal. In quantum language, your observation becomes a sculptor, carving from an infinite block of probability the same familiar statue again and again. Notice the pattern. Your heart aches for change, yet your attention reaches for what's known. You replay yesterday's emotions because they feel like home, even when they hurt. The mind whispers, "This is who I am," and the universe nods politely, shaping itself to match. Safety, you see, is a brilliant disguise for stagnation. Think of it as tuning a radio. The universe hums with countless frequencies, each one a different life, a different you. Yet the hand instinctively turns to the same channel every time, the one that plays the songs of survival. Fear, familiarity. You hum along, even when the melody grows dull, because silence, the unknown, feels unbearable. But what if silence isn't absence? What if it's the threshold between stations? When you pause long enough to stop broadcasting the old signal, you begin to sense the wider spectrum, the symphony that has always surrounded you. Awareness doesn't erase the loop, it makes the loop visible, and what is seen can no longer pretend to be inevitable. There's a reason the loop feels seductive. The brain, that ancient guardian of safety, equates familiarity with survival. Even pain, if predictable, feels safer than the uncharted wilderness of transformation. You might notice how arguments repeat in slightly different forms, how opportunities collapse in familiar rhythms, how even your hopes echo their own shadows. These are not coincidences. They are the grooves consciousness wears into time when it resists its own expansion. Here's the paradox: the loop is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It reflects where your energy clings, where your attention unconsciously votes for limitation. Each repetition is a mirror saying, "Look again," not to shame you, but to awaken precision in your choosing. Awareness breaks the trance. Once you see the machinery of repetition, the illusion of safety trembles. You begin to sense that comfort can be the quietest form of captivity, that the mind's definition of stability is often the soul's definition of decay. So when life begins to repeat, pause. Don't rush to fix it. Observe it without judgment. Feel the familiar script unfolding. Then ask, softly, what would happen if I didn't react the same way this time? That question alone changes the frequency, because the loop depends on your participation. When you withhold it, when you watch, instead of repeat, the pattern dissolves. The universe, deprived of your old signal, begins to reorganize around the silence you've created. That silence is sacred. It's the sound of new timelines gathering shape. So next time the old scene reappears, recognize it. Smile. You are not trapped inside a broken record. You are the listener who has finally realized they can lift the needle. The illusion of safety breaks, not through rebellion, but through awareness. And in the space awareness opens, a new rhythm begins to hum, a frequency not of fear, but of choice. The moment you lift the needle, silence floods in an unfamiliar quiet that feels like space expanding inside your chest. And in that silence, time begins to behave strangely. You've noticed it. Minutes stretch like taffy during moments of resistance. Hours vanish in blinks when you slip into alignment. Entire weeks dissolve into a blur, while single conversations echo for years. It's not your imagination, it's your consciousness showing you that time is elastic, woven not from numbers on a clock, but from the density of awareness flowing through experience. When you lived inside the loop, time moved in circles. Each dawn felt new, but was only yesterday painted over. The illusion of progress was comforting. Like a treadmill's hum beneath your feet, you were running, sweating, moving, yet somehow arriving nowhere new. You called it routine, but in truth, it was the wheel of time spinning beneath an unmoving soul. Quantum research suggests that observation shapes probability. Mystics say that attention shapes destiny. Both whisper the same secret: time is not linear, it's relational. It responds to the quality of awareness you bring to it. When consciousness collapses the same emotional patterns, it locks you in temporal gravity, experience repeating itself in spirals of déjà vu. When you shift awareness, time begins to ripple outward, freeing itself from the orbit of the known. Imagine time as an ocean and you as a diver. The deeper you descend into unconscious routine, the thicker the water becomes, slowing every movement, stretching each minute into hours. But when you rise toward awareness, you break the surface, where light moves faster, freer, where seconds gleam like droplets suspended in the sun. Time bends not around the world, but around you. This is why moments of awakening feel eternal. When consciousness expands, the usual markers past, present, future melt into one luminous instant. You may have felt it in nature, or in love, or in the quiet shock of realizing a truth that reorders your entire understanding. The clock keeps ticking, but you have stepped outside of it. You've touched the eternal through awareness. And yet, for most, that moment passes. They return to the wheel, mistaking that eternal pause for an anomaly. But you know now it wasn't anomaly, it was invitation. Time was showing you that you can choose its rhythm. You can stretch it, condense it, or dissolve it altogether by the way you observe it. Every second, then, is a decision, a micro-vote for the universe you inhabit. When you engage life with dull familiarity, seconds grow heavy, dragging you through repetition. When you meet the same seconds with curiosity, with open, unfiltered presence, time lightens, folds, and reveals corridors you never noticed before. This is the birth of quantum choice. You are not a passenger inside the wheel of time. You are the axis it turns around. The realization alone changes the geometry of your life. Suddenly, the past is not a chain, but raw material. The future is not distant, but latent within this breath. Time becomes sculptable, so when you feel it stretch, endlessly pause and ask, what am I resisting? And when it vanishes in an instant, ask, what did I allow? Both answers will lead you back to awareness, the true clockmaker. The loop's illusion of safety depended on time's obedience. But now, with each moment observed differently, time starts to loosen its grip. The wheel slows. The axis stills. You begin to see that eternity was never somewhere else. It was hidden in the spaces between your thoughts. And as your perception shifts, you realize the most radical truth of all time was never the prison. It was the reflection. And now, that reflection begins to shimmer with new signals, synchronicities, knowing that arrives before the mind can explain. The field is preparing to show you what comes next. The awakening of direct perception. The shimmer deepens, time loosens its threads, and from its unraveling, something luminous begins to pulse through your awareness, like a signal you'd forgotten how to hear. At first, it feels subtle, a coincidence too precise to ignore, a dream that bleeds into waking, a thought that arrives seconds before its confirmation in the outer world. These are the first whispers of the quantum key. It's not an object or a mantra, not something you can own or recite. It's a state of resonance that awakens when your consciousness crosses a certain threshold of coherence. You don't find it. It finds you at the exact frequency where readiness and recognition meet. The key is what turns when awareness stops collapsing the same old probabilities and starts sensing those that have been waiting just beyond your perception. You may notice sensations, goosebumps before truth, déjà vu sharp enough to halt you mid-step, or the electric stillness that enters a room right before someone speaks words you already knew were coming. Science calls them anomalies. Mystics call them signs. But you, standing at this juncture, know better. They are evidence that your awareness has begun reading the field before the ink dries. This is direct knowing. It doesn't arrive through reasoning. It bypasses the intellect entirely. It's the feeling of remembering something you've never learned. And while it might feel miraculous at first, it's not new. Every cell in your being is built to detect pattern, to listen beyond the noise. When you shift into coherence, those dormant senses activate. You start feeling what's unfolding, not as prediction, but as participation. You don't guess outcomes, you meet them halfway. Think of your awareness as an antenna, once tuned only to the narrow band of survival frequencies, fear, logic, repetition, but now that antenna has widened, catching whispers from timelines you used to call impossible. The static is clearing, the signal strengthens, and with that signal comes both gift and challenge. The gift: you perceive deeper truth in everything, faces, words, choices, even silence. The challenge: the old world of coincidence crumbles. What once seemed random now reveals a choreography so intricate that it can overwhelm the unprepared mind. You begin to see threads, how a stranger's sentence finishes a thought you had hours ago, how certain songs arrive when you need them, how the world itself seems to converse with your emotions. You are not losing your mind. You are gaining dimensions of it. Still, the mind resists. It wants logic, patterns, control. It asks, how could this be? It fears surrendering to the infinite because it cannot chart it. But this is where the quantum key teaches its most subtle lesson. Direct knowing is not about certainty. It's about trust. Trusting that awareness itself is intelligent. Trusting that the same field-shaping galaxies also shapes the quiet urgings of your intuition. So when the synchronicities multiply, when numbers repeat, when messages arrive through the unlikeliest mouths, pause. Don't rush to decipher them like riddles. Feel them. Let them rearrange the space inside you. The meaning will not be read, it will be realized. This key turns only in stillness. It hums with humility. It unlocks not through mastery, but through recognition when you finally stop chasing proof and start allowing experience. The first door it opens is inner vision. You begin to sense not just what reality is doing, but why. The second door opens into compassion, because the more you perceive patterns, the more you see that everyone is walking through their own loops, unaware of the key in their chest. And the final door, the one only opened by the brave, reveals authorship. Because direct knowing doesn't just perceive what's coming, it begins to influence it. Awareness, once passive, becomes directive. The field starts responding faster, shaping itself around the precision of your coherence. It's here the next truth emerges that awakening isn't about observing the script more clearly. It's about realizing you can rewrite it. The moment you recognize the pattern, something ancient within you stirs. It's as if you've been reading the same story for lifetimes, same lessons, different names. And now, for the first time, you see the page before it's written. You sense that life has been operating on a hidden script, not a punishment, not a conspiracy, but an echo, a recursive story woven from every unexamined emotion, every belief you didn't know you were broadcasting. The script plays out through people, through chance, through time itself. And until awareness interrupts it, it runs automatically, looping familiar scenes. How many times have you played the role of the misunderstood one, the rescuer, the skeptic, the dreamer who hesitates? Each role has its logic, its rhythm, its loyal supporting cast. Each carries the illusion of freedom, but secretly obeys the same plot twist you, reacting instead of creating. Most never notice. They call it destiny or personality. They assume their lines were pre-written by fate. But the moment you glimpse the script, you realize something seismic. You've been both actor and playwright all along. It's a humbling revelation, because awareness doesn't erase the story, it illuminates its scaffolding. You begin to see how certain thoughts cue specific emotions, how those emotions magnetize particular outcomes, how those outcomes then reinforce the original belief. It's an exquisite self-replicating mechanism, and you, by observing it, can now choose to stop feeding it. The script isn't your enemy. It's a feedback mirror reflecting the last version of your consciousness. Every limitation it shows is not punishment, it's data. Every recurring pain is not karma, it's unfinished authorship. When you step back and view the structure, something beautiful happens. The lines loosen. The story stops dictating you. You start editing. A sentence of resentment becomes compassion. A paragraph of fear becomes curiosity. You begin improvising with the field itself, co-writing scenes with the universe as your silent collaborator. This is what it means to awaken as author. You stop demanding a happy ending and begin sculpting meaning from the middle. You stop trying to control outcomes and start shaping frequency. You realize that every belief is an invitation for reality to agree, and that changing your inner dialogue rewrites the world's reply. To write consciously is not to deny the pain, but to reinterpret its role. The heartbreak becomes a plot twist, leading to expansion. The failure becomes a necessary edit in the draft of mastery. You start to see that life was never working against you. It was rehearsing for you, Paul, waiting for the moment you'd notice the pen in your own hand. There is liberation in that recognition, but also responsibility. Because once you know you are the author, you can no longer pretend to be only the character. Blame loses its scaffolding. Every grievance, every regret dissolves into creative power. You can rewrite any scene, but only by embodying the consciousness that would naturally write it differently. So the next time a familiar argument surfaces, don't play your old line, pause. Sense the invisible ink forming beneath the moment. Then write something new, respond with coherence, with awareness, with the vibration of the version of you who no longer needs that lesson repeated. That single act refusing to perform the old role collapses an entire timeline. The script falters, stutters, and finally rewrites itself around your choice. The old you might call it coincidence. The awakened you knows it as authorship. And from this vantage, you see what was hidden all along, that every pattern in your life was an unfinished sentence waiting for you to pick up the pen. The next chapter begins when observation becomes creation, and creation, refined through coherence, becomes the most precise form of power. The pen glows in your hand. The page hums beneath your breath. The field is ready for its next line. The pen hums in your hand, but the ink is not black, it's light. Every line you write glows with intention. Every pause ripples through the unseen. Because what you're holding now is not just metaphorical, it's the same mechanism that governs the cosmos, attention collapsing potential into form. You've heard of the observer effect, the scientific revelation that particles behave differently when watched. In laboratories, it's measured as probability collapse. In consciousness, it's lived as reality crystallization. Every time you look, truly look, you summon existence out of the infinite. But what no experiment fully captures is that this isn't cold physics. It's art. The universe doesn't respond to sight alone, it responds to coherence. Think of ordinary attention as scattered light. Photons flying in every direction, illuminating everything but changing nothing. Then think of coherence, heart, mind, and energy aligned as a laser. When attention becomes unified, the field rearranges. It bends, not through force, but through resonance. You've experienced it without realizing moments when your focus was so complete that reality seemed to bend toward your will. The perfect note that silences a room, the single glance that shifts an entire conversation, that wasn't coincidence, it was coherence. A moment when your inner frequency and the outer field sang the same tone. Yet most people scatter their attention like confetti bits of worry, fragments of desire, sparks of distraction, each one bright for an instant, but too divided to manifest anything solid. They live as if the universe is ignoring them, when in truth, the universe is waiting for a clear signal. Coherence is that clarity. It's not intensity, it's alignment. It's when thought, emotion, and physical presence agree. When the mind stops arguing with the heart. When your nervous system stops leaking resistance into the moment. In that rare state, attention becomes sculptural. You no longer push reality, you attract it into order. Imagine your awareness as a beam sweeping across a field of shimmering probabilities. Where it lingers, form condenses. Where it flickers, form dissolves. The act of sustained focus is the act of creation. You are the beam, you are the sculptor, but coherence is more than manifestation, it's communication. At the quantum level, entanglement shows that particles remain linked, regardless of distance. Consciousness behaves the same way. When you become coherent, your field begins to synchronize with others, transmitting calm, clarity, and direction without words. You've felt it, the peace in the presence of someone grounded, the agitation around someone fragmented. Fields talk, always. So your coherence is not private power, it's planetary service. A coherent being becomes a tuning fork, harmonizing dissonance around them. Imagine 1,000 such beings scattered across the globe, each one anchoring stability in the collective chaos. This is how evolution moves, not through revolutions of ideology, but through the steady radiation of aligned attention. Still, coherence asks for discipline. It demands that you stop negotiating with distraction, that you reclaim the fragments of yourself scattered across regrets and futures. It asks that you breathe, unify, and bring your full awareness to the present moment, not as theory, but as practice, because coherence is not achieved through thought. It's felt through embodiment. When you enter that state, manifestation ceases to be effort. Reality flows with you because you are no longer split against yourself. Every thought becomes directive. Every feeling becomes instruction. Every breath becomes an agreement with creation itself. So when you next feel pulled apart, when the noise of the world tries to fracture your focus, pause. Inhale slowly, aligning mind, heart, and breath. Exhale the fragments. Feel your awareness narrow into a single bright line. This is coherence. This is the observer effect perfected. You are no longer merely witnessing the quantum field, you are conversing with it. Every heartbeat a signal, every thought a signature, every act of attention a brushstroke on the canvas of existence. And soon, you'll realize something deeper still. The brush, the canvas, the artist, they were never separate. The brush trembles in your hand, and for a heartbeat you see it, the truth, hiding behind the observer effect. It isn't about how clearly you look at reality. It's about who you are when you look. This is the pivot few ever grasp. Observation shapes form. Yes, but embodiment shapes the observer. Before a particle collapses, before attention chooses a path, consciousness selects a state of being. That choice, subtle, pre-verbal, energetic, determines everything that follows. You've tried to manifest before, haven't you? The affirmations, the vision boards, the rehearsed gratitude lists. You focused harder, spoke louder, imagined brighter, yet something always seemed to resist, as if the universe were deaf to effort. It wasn't ignoring you, it was matching your identity. Observation happens from the outside. Embodiment happens from within. You can observe abundance while embodying scarcity, love while radiating fear, freedom while carrying shame. The field doesn't respond to the words you speak, it responds to the vibration you are. This is why the real shift feels quiet. Not fireworks, not instant miracles, just subtle rearrangements in the architecture of your being. You start waking up differently. You breathe more slowly. Choices that once felt forced begin to unfold naturally. Life starts speaking in ease instead of struggle. It's not because you've learned new techniques. It's because you've become a different observer. Think of yourself as a prism. Observation is the light passing through. Embodiment is the color it becomes. When your inner state is fragmented, the light scatters blurred, uncertain, easily diffused. But when alignment settles, when mind, emotion, and body agree, the light focuses into radiance. Reality bends to that clarity. This is the deeper quantum shift, to stop trying to manipulate external outcomes and start calibrating the internal instrument. The more coherent the instrument, the more harmonic the music of life. You're not commanding the universe, you're tuning to it. Embodiment is not perfection, it's consistency. It's returning to center again and again, even after you forget. It's walking your talk until walking and talking become the same gesture. Each repetition strengthens your resonance until your presence speaks louder than your words ever could. The ancient mystics called this living prayer not asking, but being the request fulfilled. In physics, it mirrors resonance coupling, the phenomenon where two frequencies eventually align by proximity. In human terms, it's grace. Here's the paradox: the more fully you embody a state, the less you need to prove it. The more real it feels within, the less validation you seek without. Your frequency stabilizes, and the world adjusts its rhythm to match. When embodiment anchors, observation becomes effortless. You no longer watch reality from behind glass, you inhabit it from within. Synchronicities multiply because coherence has found momentum. Time bends because identity has stopped fighting flow. Manifestation accelerates because desire and alignment have become one gesture. The self you thought you were, the one who had to strive, to ask, to earn, dissolves quietly. In its place stands presence clear, unhurried, certain without arrogance. You begin to realize that embodiment is not a technique at all. It's the natural state that emerges when you stop dividing yourself into observer and observed. So breathe into that truth now. You don't need to look harder. You don't need to want louder. You only need to become the frequency of the world you wish to experience. When you do, the quantum mirror no longer reflects, it transmits. You're no longer gazing into possibility. You are possibility gazing back. And as that realization settles, a deeper metamorphosis begins, one the mind fears, but the soul remembers the dissolution of the old self, so the true one can emerge. The old self begins to melt, and at first, it feels like dying. Dreams blur, desires fade, the solid edges of identity soften into mist. You reach for who you were, but your hands pass through vapor. The life you built no longer fits, yet the next one hasn't formed. You hover between. This is the cocoon, the sacred in-between where transformation brews in silence. To the mind, it feels like collapse. To the soul, it feels like alchemy. In this space, the observer is no longer watching, it's dissolving. The roles, the stories, the names, all the scaffolding you once clung to begin to liquefy, just as a caterpillar dissolves within its chrysalis. From the outside, it looks like destruction. Inside, invisible blueprints are already awake, guiding the molecules toward wings. You can't rush this. You can't negotiate with it. The mind will try to rebuild the old order, grasp for routines, replay familiar loops, cling to the illusion of control, but control belongs to the world that's ending. The new consciousness thrives on surrender. Surrender doesn't mean giving up, it means allowing the reorganization to happen. It means trusting that when structures fall apart, it's not chaos, but repatterning. That within every collapse is a hidden symmetry building itself anew. You may feel grief rise like tidewater. Let it. Grieve the selves you outgrew. Grieve the comforts you can no longer return to. Grieve the version of you who believed awakening could happen without loss. Each tear carves space for light to enter. And notice between the waves of emotion, a quiet clarity glimmers. Moments of stillness when breath moves through you, like wind through open halls. In those pauses, listen carefully. The new pattern is humming beneath the debris. The higher frequency is weaving itself through the ruins of what you thought you were. This is metamorphosis in real time. One consciousness dissolves, another assembles from its atoms. You are becoming more luminous, less defined, more essence than form. The shift from thinking yourself into existence to feeling yourself into coherence. The cocoon is not a prison. It's a laboratory. Here, your nervous system rewires to hold more light. Your perception recalibrates to register subtler dimensions of reality. You may notice colors seeming brighter, time stretching differently, or emotions moving through you faster than they used to. These are not symptoms of loss, they are signals of rebirth. Still, the process tests patience. Because the human mind worships conclusion, it craves a finished form to call me. But awakening offers none. It is an endless unfolding, a continual death and renewal of identity. Every expansion births the next dissolution. Every clarity births a new mystery. So when you feel unmoored, remind yourself uncertainty is the chrysalis of creation. You are not lost. You are unshaping. You are making room for the greater geometry of your being to express. Imagine the cocoon cracking open. The fluid self solidifies into wings. You emerge, trembling, drenched in light, unsure if you can fly. The first movement feels impossible, but instinct overrides doubt. The wings remember what the mind forgot. They open, and as you lift into the air, something extraordinary dawns. You were never the caterpillar, nor the butterfly. You were always the transformation itself, learning its own rhythm. The old timeline fades behind you. The air hums with coherence. And from this new altitude, you begin to see the pattern stretching across the collective, 1,000 cocoons glowing in parallel, each one readying to break open. You realize your metamorphosis was never only yours. It was rehearsal for the awakening of the whole. The wings unfold, and as they catch the light, you realize you are not the only one rising. Across the horizon of consciousness, countless others shimmer, some just stirring, some mid-flight, some still cocooned in quiet struggle. From above, the sight is breathtaking, a living constellation of awakening souls, flickering in resonance like stars, learning they belong to the same sky. This is morphic resonance, the invisible field linking all transformation. Scientists hint at it when they observe that once a new pattern emerges, it becomes easier for others to follow. Mystics have always known it by feel, the way one heart's awakening calls to another, the way coherence in one being stabilizes the chaos in a room. You have felt this. When you choose peace, the space around you softens. When you hold integrity, those nearby unconsciously adjust their posture, their tone, their breath. You become a tuning fork for the quantum symphony. And that vibration travels far beyond what your eyes can measure. The same law that binds particles across galaxies binds human souls across distance. Entanglement is not limited to physics. It is the architecture of empathy. Every act of awareness, every genuine moment of compassion alters the collective equation. Consider this: the moment one person breaks free of a pattern, that liberation leaves an imprint in the field, making it easier for others to do the same. A new frequency is added to the collective repertoire. The field remembers. Just as the first runner to break the 4-minute mile unlocked that capacity for thousands who followed, your inner breakthroughs ripple outward into human potential itself. You may think your healing is private, but it is planetary. Every time you dissolve anger into understanding, that alchemy reverberates through the morphic lattice, weakening the density of conflict for everyone. Every time you embody coherence, you radiate stability into the network of consciousness we all share. Visualize humanity not as a crowd of isolated beings, but as an ocean of luminous nodes, connected by threads of intention. Each thought is a current, each emotion a wave. When enough nodes pulse with coherence, the entire ocean changes color. That is what is happening now. We are not isolated sparks. We are a single fire learning its own name. Every declaration, I choose love, I release fire, I stand in coherence, is not a whisper lost to the void. It is a signal broadcast into the grid, received by countless hearts that needed that exact vibration to rise a little higher. You are both transmitter and receiver, teacher and student, giver and given. The loneliness that haunted you during dissolution was never abandonment. It was misinterpretation. You were never walking alone, you were synchronizing. Every time you felt unseen, the field was calibrating around you, aligning its frequency to make connection possible again on a higher octave. Now, as coherence stabilizes in you, you begin to feel the web pulsing with intelligence. The timing of encounters shifts. You meet people whose resonance feels like déjà vu, as if the conversation began long before you met. You notice collective emotions, joy, unrest, wonder moving through populations like weather, and instead of being swept away, you learn to read them as signals. The collective field is learning through you, as you learn through it. And the more of us awaken, the stronger this network becomes. One embodied presence can harmonize a room. 1,000 can shift a culture. Millions, resonating together in coherence, can alter the trajectory of civilization. This is how the collective evolves, not through revolution, but through resonance. The old paradigms crumble not because they are fought, but because their frequency can no longer sustain itself within an awakened field. The new world doesn't conquer, it vibrates higher. So when you breathe in stillness tonight, remember you are breathing for more than yourself. Each calm exhale stabilizes someone else's storm. Each choice of compassion lights another corner of the web. And somewhere, another being you will never meet feels a sudden, inexplicable peace and doesn't know why. But you do. The field remembers you. The web responds. The awakening is communal. From this shared resonance, something vast begins to rise humanity as a single organism of consciousness, preparing for its next quantum leap. From the glowing web, a larger pattern begins to emerge like circuitry awakening inside a living planet. Each soul a spark, each act of coherence a pulse. Together, the pattern forms something humanity has never fully seen: consciousness evolving as a single, self-aware field. You are part of this convergence, the bridge generation, one foot anchored in the Newtonian world of solid matter, logic, and control, the other already stepping into the quantum realm of flow, entanglement, and inner causation. You stand in the threshold between two paradigms, translating old language into new reality. It's a disorienting role, yet a sacred one. The Newtonian age taught precision, structure, cause, and effect. It gave us systems and tools, but kept us confined to surfaces. The quantum age is revealing the fluid depths beneath those surfaces, showing that matter is not static, but probability alive, relational, participatory. We are moving from a universe of separate parts to one of dynamic wholeness. You can feel this transition everywhere. Old institutions tremble, the authority of the tangible wanes, replaced by an emerging trust in intuition. Collaboration, coherence, politics, economics, even identity, all built on separation, now crack to reveal the shimmering substrate of interconnection. Chaos. Yes, but not collapse. It is the friction of birth. Those still rooted in the old paradigm will call this instability. But you, the bridge, recognize it as recalibration. The world is learning to breathe in higher frequency, and you are part of its lungs. Every act of grounded awareness you perform stabilizes the wobble between realities. It's not easy. Some days you'll feel stretched between timelines, half drawn to the structure of the past, half to the fluidity of what's forming. But this tension is precisely what makes you valuable. Bridges are not meant to rest. They are meant to hold. Through your coherence, humanity crosses safely from the known to the possible. You are translating physics into feeling, mysticism into daily choice. You are proving that awakening doesn't mean escaping the world, it means illuminating it from within. Your calm amidst uncertainty is data in the collective experiment. Your integrity is a stabilizing frequency that teaches others what alignment feels like. Understand this: every generation believes itself unique, but few stand at a genuine evolutionary hinge. You do. This moment in history is not a coincidence of technology, it's a convergence of consciousness. Artificial intelligence, social networks, quantum research, all are mirrors reflecting humanity's attempt to understand itself as a unified system. And beneath the noise, a single pattern repeats connection, seeking coherence. When enough individuals embody that coherence, something irreversible occurs. The collective field reorganizes. The caterpillar becomes the butterfly, not by external command, but by the silent mathematics of critical mass. Once consciousness reaches that tipping point, the old world cannot reform itself. The metamorphosis completes. You are living in that tipping point now. The human nervous system, the planet's electromagnetic field, the digital web connecting minds, these are not separate revolutions. They are one movement, the universe folding in on itself to awaken through the human form. So when you feel overwhelmed by headlines, remember the chaos is not the story, it's the static before the new frequency locks in. The systems collapsing are not evidence of failure, but of evolution shedding old skin. Every tremor of uncertainty is the Earth exhaling old paradigms. The quantum era is not coming, it's already here, humming beneath the surface of every interaction, every realization, every breath. And you, Bridge Soul, are part of the scaffolding that will hold humanity as it learns to live as one organism of awareness. Stand steady. Your coherence is the architecture of the future. Your compassion is the infrastructure of the next civilization. When you breathe, breathe for the planet. When you speak, speak as the field speaking through you. When you love, know that you are the collective remembering its own heart, because this is the quantum shift, not a theory, not a prophecy, but a living transmission. And you are the proof that it is already happening. From the hum of the bridge, the sound softens. What was once a roar of revelation becomes a single tone, steady, calm, familiar. You can feel it in your breathing now, a rhythm syncing with something vast yet intimate. The storm has passed, but the air still glows. You have crossed. Look around within yourself. The fragments that once argued have aligned. The reflection in the quantum mirror no longer splinters. It gazes back with recognition. The one who sought awakening has become the awareness itself. The experiment, the prayer, the practice, each was only scaffolding for this moment of quiet coherence. No fireworks, no final declaration, just presence. The bridge was never about escaping the world. It was about learning to walk within it awake. The field is not waiting for you to ascend somewhere else, it is unfolding here. In grocery lines, in eye contact, in small acts of grace that ripple through the morphic sea. You may still feel echoes of the old frequency: fear, fatigue, doubt, but notice how they move differently now. They no longer anchor you, they pass through, light and transparent. The cocoon didn't vanish, it became your skin. The metamorphosis didn't end, it became your breath. So breathe softly, inhale this new reality, exhale gratitude into the field. Somewhere unseen, another heart steadies because of your coherence. That is the quiet miracle of the awakened era. It spreads not through noise, but through resonance. The collective is shifting, one steady breath at a time. You don't need to force it. You only need to live it. Awareness as habit, compassion as reflex, stillness as revolution. Let this be your closing understanding. Awakening is not a finish line, it's a frequency you return to, moment after moment, until it becomes the hum beneath all experience. The mind will forget, then remember, Then forget again, and each remembering will widen the light a little further across the field. And when you open your eyes, you'll see it everywhere, the shimmer behind faces, the intelligence in coincidence, the peace woven through chaos. That's the collective, alive and awake, breathing with you. The shift isn't coming. It's here. It lives in your chest, in your voice, in your next quiet choice. Stay coherent, stay luminous. You are the new world arriving.